not in the sense of that we are closing this live, but it is nighttime. So, good evening to everyone. I hope you all had a productive day. I have had a very busy last 2 days. My rest of my week is going to be busy too. I have some other things I got to do on a weekend that is going to make me busy. I'm probably going to be busy all into next week, but um I wanted to come and talk to you guys because the Carmelo Anthony trial is about to start, okay? So, jury selection for the trial started yesterday. And I wanted to come talk to you guys so that when I come to do my evening lives, because since the way my schedule is this week, more than likely I will have to come talk to you guys about it in the evening. So I wanted to set up for us to have a discussion about the timeline and about jury selection, the racial tension that is surrounding the trial, the doxing of the judge who gave Carmelo the bond. I wanted to lay all of that foundation prior to us going into completion of jury selection tomorrow. So it is they are anticipating that jury selection for the trial will end tomorrow and that opening statements will begin on Thursday. There will be Saturday court. That was also reported. Now, I don't know if it will be Saturday court through the duration of the trial or if it's just this week. There was no court today. So jury selection started yesterday, and some things I wanted to talk to you guys about. I got a few articles that we're gonna read so that we can try to make sure that we cover all the base so that we can have good discussion in the evenings about the evidence in the trial. Okay. So before we get started, well, to start, not before we get started. Hey Miller, how you doing, boo? Um, well, to start, we must state that Carmelo Anthony is being charged with first degree murder for the stabbing of Austin Metcalf. Okay? Carmelo was 17 years old at the time of the stabbing. The stabbing happened in April of 2025. Okay? And so he's not being charged. Hey, Queen Keish. Hey, boo. Hey, I just didn't know about this case. He may be found guilty to me, nothing to do with race, but I don't want him to be. So that I'm gonna try to cover some ground so we can have some foundation and for good discussion because I think that this is a very uh reasonable case to look at from all different angles. Like there are lots of angles to this case. And so one of the things I wanted to start out with, so like I said, Carmelo, he's being charged with first degree murder, you guys. Now keep in mind, this he didn't know this boy. Both of these boys were at the school, I believe. I don't know what I gotta see if it's gonna tell us what school they were, but this is in Frisco, Texas, right? Neither one of these boys attended the same school. There was a lot of rumor on the internet. Okay, hey Miller. It was a lot of rumor on the internet that these boys had some kind of no knowledge of each other or knew each other or something. But both of these families are confirming that none of that is true. Um, and so, which surveillance are you talking about, Queen Keish? I think there was a surveillance release, and I'm gonna go through the timeline in a minute. But before I go through the timeline, I wanted to do something else. So this judge in this case, right? He is he got a tight rein on this case, y'all. They so only legacy media that was pre-approved in order to enter the courtroom will be able to go into the courtroom with their computers to take notes. All other persons that may be non-traditional media, most of the non-traditional media is going to be attending only as the public. Um, if you go to Nick at Night's video from last night, I posted her video earlier yesterday. She is on site at the trial. Her, Queen Sheba, Gerald from the North Carolina beat. All three of them are there. I don't know who else is there right now, but those are the three that I have seen, and they are on site reporting firsthand from the courtroom, right? And in this case, we are going to be relying on legacy media and non-traditional media to give us details, because this judge has a very, 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 very strict gag order in this case. They are not, they were yesterday, the YouTubers that I mentioned talked about how they were screened prior to coming into the courtroom. They had to leave their phones outside. If they took a Uber, if anyone took a Uber to the courthouse, they had to figure out what to do. It was no, we're gonna hold or store or house your belongings somewhere here in the courthouse. No, the judge does not want it in the courthouse at all. So I don't know, with those people who may have gotten to the court by some other method other than driving themselves to court. I don't know what they did with their devices, but the devices, there were no devices allowed into the courtroom. And that even goes down to them looking at people's sunglasses, because of now the way that they can be used in order to record. And I mean, not their glasses, not sunglasses, but their glasses, how they can record. They aren't allowing that, any of that. They are being checked thoroughly. Originally, you're gonna hear Nick at Night talk about how when they filled out the questionnaire to see if they could enter as media. When she filled the questionnaire out, she submitted everything that was required. She wasn't selected to be viewed as media for the case. But she was, I think, given a place to be able to be part of the public for the trial. I think that it's not a guaranteed spot. I think that's what she was saying, but that it's it's likely that she's going to get into the courtroom as public, based on how the selection was done with the process that she had to go through. But she said that she sent a message to find out whether or not she could bring her laptop in, because since she had completed the request to be looked at as media, she was okay with them allowing her in as public. But she wanted to know if she would be able to bring her laptop in so that she could take notes and things of that nature. And they let her know, no, you are not allowed to do that. She responded back by saying, oh, well, I'll just make sure I just bring my pen and a paper then. Thanks. Thanks anyway. Well, they had messaged her back and said, you can't bring a pen and paper. Right? And this was the rules up until, I think she said, like 2 weeks before the trial. So a lot of the commentators who were considering going to the trial, I think that's what they were in panic mode about that, because originally it was nothing. They weren't going to be able to bring anything into the courtroom but themselves. But the court decided to bend the rules and to bend their original rules and allow pen and paper into the courtroom, so that other non-traditional reporters who are in the courtroom as public can take notes in order for them to be able to provide us with updates. So we are going to be relying on the updates of these commentators, because that is really all we're going to have. Okay, so before we get started on the timeline of events that led up to this event, I want to talk about first one trivial piece that most of the people are arguing about right now. So there are lots of arguments shaped around this case. It's a lot of racial undertones and a lot of racial tension. But one of the main things that most people who are trying to look at the case are debating is whether or not a knife is allowed on the school premises, because this is an important piece of the case. Now, if anyone wants to ask me what I think right now without seeing any of the evidence, without knowing about anything, because there's been a gag on this, things been under seal, so we have no one's been able to see motions and different pieces of evidence and get information about hearings. None of that. No one has been able to do any of that. So everyone goes, when we get those reports of what happened in the courtroom, that will be our first eyes into the evidence, into everything, because we have no clue of anything. Everything was under seal. So, if if people want to know what I think, my opinion, before we even know any of the evidence, before we hear any of the testimony, I am going to go this far and say, I do not believe that that boy should be found guilty of first-degree murder. Just by the police report of what happened on the day of the event taking place. I don't think this meets first degree murder. And it is the same reason. And the reason I say that is not because he's black and I'm black. The reason I say that is the same reason why I said that the officers who did what they did to Freddie Gray should not have been charged with first degree murder. Depraved heart murder. Right? Because it was overzealous. And I feel the same thing that happened in George Zimmerman, an overzealous prosecutor. The same thing we had with Freddie Gray, an overzealous prosecutor. And y'all know I love my Marilyn Mosby. But she was a new district attorney. She was overzealous in that case. And a case coming at the police at that. Right? It's the same reason I say it here with Karmelo. And I feel like if we get any other verdict than a not guilty on the first degree, then I'm going to feel like the jury didn't do their job. And that's without me even seeing any of the evidence. Remember, like how I told y'all, I'm convinced David did the murder. Well, in this situation, I'm convinced that this boy didn't do no first degree murder. And I don't need to see nothing but the police report to know what happened the day of the event. Now, the debate amongst those who are trying to look at the case and are not trying to cloud the case with all of these racial arguments, right? Which they will come in. And I agree that it will be a part of this case. But I'm trying to look at this case as just looking at the facts of the case and looking at the law, right? And those people who are focused on those things are arguing over, was he proper in having a knife on school premises to begin with? That is an important question. Because whether if the knife, so let me read to you guys, okay? Let's go, because I want to go there first, okay? I want that to be where we start. So, Texas Penal Code 46.003, right? A knife, a blade over 5.5 inches is considered a third degree felony. Okay? That would be it's called a location restricted knife, right? The law says it is illegal to intentionally, knowingly, or recklessly possess or carry these knives on the physical premises of a school, any grounds or building where a school-sponsored activity is occurring, or a school passenger bus, right? So, to carry a knife under Texas Penal Code that is over 5.5 inches is considered to be a third degree felony. That third degree felony can be 10 years in prison and up to a $10,000 fine, right? There are also penal codes under that section that talk about carrying a knife of any length shorter than 5.5 inches, right? Possessing certain inherently dangerous blades on school premises is a criminal offense. It is a Class A misdemeanor. This would include switchblade knives, knuckles, explosive weapons, or zip guns. Okay? So, the school district policy, if a knife is under 5.5 inches and not legally classified as a prohibited weapon, it does not trigger a state weapon charge under Penal Code 46.03. However, all public schools in Texas enforce strict zero tolerance policies. Students found with any knife, regardless of size, face severe disciplinary action. Under Texas Education Code 37.007, students are typically subject to mandatory removal to a disciplinary alternative education program or expulsion. Okay? Now, it's the reason I wanted to read that, and I want us to start there. I wanted us to start with looking at what punishment would Karmelo have if he was just found to have a knife in his possession, right? On school grounds. So the punishment that he would face, if it was a blade over 5.5 inches, would be a third degree felony, which could get him up to 10 years in prison. Okay? Anything under that, under the Texas Penal Code, it says that he's more likely not to, it's a misdemeanor. He's not going to class A misdemeanor. He's likely not to have any penalty for it. Right? So, we know that him carrying a knife onto the school grounds was against the rules. It was against the law. So we can confirm that. That is something that, based on the evidence, and because of his own confession, will not be able to be disputed. Okay? I don't see any way of disputing that. Karmelo ended up being expelled from school as a result of this incident. And there were a lot of people who fought that, who were upset about that. But right here in the codes that I just read, the Texas Education Code, the zero tolerance policy of the Texas public school systems, it says that that is the penalty. Yeah, they charge him as an adult, exactly. And he's charged with a first degree murder charge. And this is why I say that with me just looking at the police report, I agree. I disagree with this. I disagree with it for the same reason I disagree with how George Zimmerman was charged. And I disagree with it for the same reason why I disagree with why the officers in the Freddie Gray case were charged. Because I think it is overzealous. It is an overzealous prosecution. And I think this is exactly what they are doing with Karmelo. And we are about to see how Carmelo's case is going to turn out as opposed to those other two cases. I'm giving two other cases as a point of reference. One of them where both of them where the cases were very unpopular, but for different reasons. For different reasons, those cases and the verdicts in those cases were unpopular. But I tend to agree with the verdict in both of those cases. As much as and as bad as so many people don't agree with either one of those verdicts, I happen to agree with the verdict in those cases. It was an overzealous prosecution. Both of those individuals were overcharged. And if they had been properly charged for the crimes that they had actually committed, I think a jury might have seen things differently. In this case, if we get a guilty verdict based on what I've seen from the police report, based on what both families have confirmed that these two boys did not know each other at all, based on the series of events that happened in the timeline the day of the murder, I do not believe that he should have been charged with a first-degree murder charge. It is an overzealous prosecution. Okay, that's how I look at it. And in order to make the example, I compare it to Freddie Gray. I compare it to George Zimmerman. Of the prosecutor in the Zimmerman case, they went for the lesser included later, and I think that what they thought they were going to get the guilty, right? Just because of the high profile case, they thought they were going to get the guilty, and then when they realized that their case was going down into the dumps, then they charged the lesser included, and then to me, this is just my opinion. That says to the jury that you really don't, you have improved your case. Like I know it's not supposed to like look that way. I know it's something that the prosecutor has the liberty to do, but I feel like when they do that at that late of a stage in the case, like they did in the George Zimmerman trial, it says to the jury, you didn't prove your case. And so I think that's what said, if they had went and charged him properly and not been going for a life sentence, because a lot of times that is what these prosecutors are looking for when they do this, right? They are looking for a life sentence. So they go with this overzealous prosecution in order to get a life sentence and to get this person put away for a very long time. But to me, if you know that that is not what this person did, why would you charge them with that? It's political. To me, anytime that is done with a case that reaches this type of national attention, it is all political. And that's why I don't agree with it. Because then you don't get justice for families that way. Do I think that George Zimmerman was guilty and that he should have went to jail for something? Absolutely. But I don't believe that it was first degree murder. I don't believe that the officers who got Freddie Gray that day, that it was deprived heart murder. Because you're saying that those people came to work that morning with the intentions to do that to him. And that's what you have to prove. That is a high threshold. And so it's the reason I don't agree with it. And so I don't agree with it in this case. I do not believe that, according to the police report, according to what the other bystanders have said that they've seen in their report, because like I said, it's a lot we have not seen yet, and the trial hasn't proceeded. But if I'm gonna give my opinion at first sight, he didn't. This is not first degree murder. I'm sorry, and I would have to tell that judge, let me walk out your courtroom, because no, I don't care what you all try to tell me. I can't listen to it after I look at the police report. After I look at what the other bystanders had to say about what happened that day. You've already not convinced me that this is not first degree murder. I can't see, I know what type of cases I can look at and be unbiased. And then I know what cases I bring a bias to. And this is a case where I will bring a bias to, and I'm sorry. I don't care what the evidence that you think you're putting in front of me. There's nothing that is going to convince me that this is a first degree murder. And that this is what this boy should be charged with, right? So, um I I'm assuming, this is just what I'm assuming. I'm assuming that the prosecution is going to somehow try to make a case for first degree murder with two things. One, him bringing the weapon to the school, and the fact that that is a crime in and of itself. And so he shouldn't have brought the weapon with him to school. And then what he stated to the defendant prior to the altercation. That's what I think the two things that the prosecution are going to use in order to try to get to a threshold of first degree. Okay? I don't buy it. I don't buy that. I'm sorry. It's too many reasons why a little black boy in a place like Texas would be carrying a knife. He could be carrying worse. I'm sorry. And so, should he have been expelled? This is going to be another unpopular opinion that I have. Yes. That's what the penal code says. The penal code says, and their zero tolerance school policy says, that if you do this, this is what will happen, and this is the consequence. And I know there were a lot of people who were very upset about what happened to him and about his expulsion. But I believe that the expulsion was proper. That's what should have happened to someone who does that. It says even school events. It does not have to be a school day. Even at a school event, the punishment can be up to expulsion. He was allowed to graduate. He was not allowed to participate. After there were lots of organizations who fought for him, he was not allowed to return to school. He did graduate with his 3.7 GPA, but he wasn't able to attend the graduation events. He was able to graduate. But I do believe that was proper, that the expulsion was proper. Okay? Because that expulsion was not dependent on whether or not he killed Austin or not. That the murder of Austin had nothing to do with the expulsion. The expulsion was the fact that he trespassed on school property with a weapon that he wasn't supposed to have on school property. And that is part of the zero tolerance policy. And so, do I look at the expulsion like it was proper? Yes. Do I look at this first degree murder charge as being proper? No. Okay. What you say, Queen Kish? You said we got to look at the guy not having a weapon. The other boy didn't have a weapon, so we can't say self-defense. It doesn't matter if he had a weapon. He made according to lots of people in Brown, he made a threat to the boy to cause bodily harm. And when Austin made a threat to physically remove Karmelo from the tent, and that would involve bodily harm, Karmelo warned Austin and said, fuck around and find out. That is what I think they are going to try to use in order to create this first degree murder threshold. To meet that. They are going to attempt to use his what is it called? What's it's called, a certain kind of threat. Not when you make a right out threat, but you make a threat that is contingent on something, right? So Karmelo did not make a threat to him and then do what he did without anything happening. Karmelo made a contingent threat to him. And you have to consider the fact that this is a little black boy in Texas. Why are the reasons that he may have a knife? I'm not justifying him having a knife because I'm saying I agree with the expulsion. That was proper. But when we are evaluating him for murder and the intentions on how this murder came to be, and we want to charge him with first degree murder, right? In order to charge him with first degree murder, it had to be some intentions. When he told him, touch me and you're going to find out what's going to happen, I don't think he intended that he was going to kill him. But you're not going to put your hands on me. And then you got to consider he's the only person under the tent with all of these people who know each other. All of these boys who know each other. They family and friends. They go to the same school. They're already in a situation where they're in a competition situation because they are at a track meet. So that's already tense. Then there's some question of whether or not there was some other things that occurred under the tent that might have triggered this whole thing. But regardless of that, he is outnumbered to all of these other people around him. So his thinking that he has to do what he needs to survive amongst all of these people around him, that can be considered self-defense. And I'm really, really interested to hear the defense's theory and how they go about. I'm interested to hear the prosecution's theory on how do they get to first degree murder. But I think the two things that I mentioned is the fact that he came to the school with a knife, and that is illegal. And then the response that he gave after Austin threatened to physically remove him from the tent, those are the only two things that I can see that they are going to be able to use or try to use to get to a first degree murder. And I don't think that that is enough of anything. Now, we haven't seen anything yet. So I'm open to look at everything that the trial has to offer. I just know that if for me, I'm as a lay person, I could sit here and look at it and say, well, I was wrong, whatever. I wouldn't put myself on that jury because I'm already going to that jury with a bias because I feel like that this is overzealous. Why would you charge this child with a first degree murder charge that could put him in prison for 99 years? Like, that's just crazy to me. It's crazy to me. But like I said, we've seen this before. And I'm giving you two very distinct, very high profile cases where I also felt like that it was overzealous prosecution and that it was both for different reasons and they all had different genetic makeup. In one case, you had this Hispanic, George, I guess he's Hispanic or I don't know, he's white, Hispanic, whatever he is. But I guess he's a white man. But you have Zimmerman. He's a white man. I felt like that was an overzealous prosecution. And then you have the cops in the not the Trayvon Martin, in the Freddie Gray. Another, I feel like, overzealous prosecution, right? So this is what I'm likening what's happening to Karmelo right now. That this is a situation where you have an overzealous prosecutor who is thinking that they are going to be able to get this landmark victory off of this high-profile, racially tense case. And it is very well possible that in the state of Texas, this may happen. I just think that if this happens, that I will label this as a miscarriage of justice. And it is the reason why. Do I think that there is something that he can be charged with? That yes, but not a first degree murder. That's not what that's not this, right? So let's run quickly over the timeline of events that took place the day of the murder, okay? So give me 1 second. So the stabbing of Austin Metcalf took place on April the 2nd of 2025. Metcalf and Anthony, they were both 17, were at a track meet at Kuykendall Stadium in Frisco. They did not attend the same school and they did not know each other. Just before 10 a.m., there was an altercation under a tent in the bleachers, during which Anthony stabbed Metcalf. Metcalf was taken to a hospital where he died. Anthony was arrested and charged with murder. Okay? According to a police report. Now, when they say he was arrested and charged with murder, he turned himself in. So they ain't had to go find him. Hey Ty, how you doing, boo? You said that's why I want to see the surveillance video. I'm sure the jury will see it. I think that might have been a release. Let me go down this timeline because I didn't get to do a whole lot of prep before this, but let me go down this timeline and then it might say that it was released, and if so, then I'll see if I can find it to post it. But if not, I'm pretty sure that if it's released into evidence to the jury, then we will probably see it later on that day. It will probably be released to the public later on that day. It's just that there won't be any cameras in the court to view it in the court view. But I'm pretty sure that it will be released that day. Okay. So it says on April the 4th. So that was the second. On the second was the day of the stabbing. And Anthony turned himself in immediately after to the police. He admits at that time that yes, he did it. He is the one who did it. And he asked whether or not Metcalf is going to make it or not. And then I think they let him know that he passed away. So, according to a police report released 2 days later, so the police report was released on April the 4th. Anthony admitted to the stabbing, claiming it was self-defense. A witness reported to police that they were sitting with Metcalf under their school's tent in the bleachers when someone they didn't know, identified as Anthony, came over to them. Now, let me say this. It was raining cats and dogs. That was the reason why everyone went under the tent. So when Karmelo went underneath the school tent that he was not affiliated with, what a lot of the onlookers and the people attending the track meet that day said, everybody was just trying to find refuge under a tent because the rain came. And so this is how Karmelo ends up under the tent where Metcalf's other classmates are. Okay. And so it says a witness reported to police that they were sitting with Metcalf under their school tent in the bleachers when someone they didn't know, identified as Anthony, came over to them. The witness said Metcalf told Anthony to leave the tent. When Anthony grabbed his bag, opened it, reached inside, touched me and see what happens. The police document said no one thought Anthony had a weapon. So I guess it was okay. Now, mind you, this is someone that is close to Metcalf that is telling the story this way, right? So, but it is consistent because Anthony does say in his report to the police that he did warn him, "Don't touch me." Um, it says Anthony grabbed his bag, opened it, reached inside. Now, this is what they are saying. I guess saying that he did all of this ahead of time, right? This is what I guess we need to wait to find out. The police documents say no one thought Anthony had a weapon. So I guess these kids, these young boys, these young white boys, right? Because they didn't think he had a weapon, they thought it was okay to put their hands on him. That's what that implies to me. When I hear somebody say that, oh, well, I didn't think he had a weapon. Okay, well, whether he had a weapon or not, why did you think that it was okay that y'all try to touch him? What inhumanity do y'all have inside of y'all that y'all had an issue with him being underneath y'all tent while it's pouring cats and dogs? It's not like he's sitting up under there and sitting there trying to be your friend. It's pouring down raining. Where is your humanity with that? But furthermore, this to me, this statement is kind of telling, and it's telling on these individuals, these kids, right? That, oh, we didn't think he had a weapon. So since y'all didn't think he had a weapon, y'all thought it was okay for y'all to try to physically remove him from the tent. That's what that's saying to me. That's what that's saying. That's just like those white boys with those guns after Ahmaud Arbery. That's that type of thinking, right? That's that type of thinking. Oh, you are in a space where we think you shouldn't be. We are entitled to be able to remove you. But oh, wait a minute. Omar Arbery didn't have no weapons. Carmelo had a weapon. Oh, well, we didn't think he had a weapon. Well, you didn't have no business thinking of putting your hands on him. That's what you should have been thinking. You should have been thinking that should respect people's autonomy and space. You see that it's raining cats and dogs. Why would you be trying to remove this boy from this tent? But you ain't think about that. You put emphasis on him having the weapon, right? So, they didn't think he had a weapon. And that's what I mean, Queen Keish. Like, when you listen to this, you see the intentions of those boys on that day. So, was Karmelo wrong for having a knife on school property? Absolutely. Does that mean punishment is expulsion? Is up to expulsion? Absolutely. Do I agree with the expulsion? Absolutely. Would I agree with a third-degree felony for him carrying a knife if it's over 5.5 inches? Absolutely. Would I agree with him being charged with a misdemeanor if it was under 5.5? Absolutely. Do I agree with first-degree murder? Absolutely not. Do I agree with some kind of other murder where he's not where it is not made to believe that he would have some intentions to do this? Maybe. Does this sound like this was some self-defense? Yes. Can we have a debate in that jury room over whether or not if he didn't have the knife that would have made? But then I would have to ask myself this question. If he didn't have the knife, what else would have happened? What would have happened to him? If he did not have the knife in order to defend himself against whatever those boys intended to do, what could have happened to him? While they were attempting to physically remove him from a tent on school property while they are at a track meet, a school event. Seems like to me, I mean, I hate to say this, if Austin didn't pass away, he should have probably been expelled too based on the zero tolerance school policy. Because normally a zero tolerance school policy results in both individuals being expelled because it does not tolerate one doing anything to the other. You can't, in a zero tolerance school zone, you can't say, oh, he hit me, so I hit him back. Right? And in this case, this is not what happened. Austin puts his hands onto Karmelo Anthony first. So we can have the conversation over the knife about it being illegal to have. Where are those charges? I can give you a guilty on some of those, depending on what that is. Let's look at that and let's see what that is. But when it comes to this first degree murder, absolutely not. Absolutely not. I don't have any compromise on that, right? So it says one witness said Metcalf touched Anthony, and another said Metcalf grabbed Anthony. Anthony then pulled out a knife and stabbed Metcalf once in the chest before running away, according to police. At that point, Metcalf grabbed his chest and told everyone to get help, one witness said. Police said when they arrived at the scene, Metcalf wasn't conscious or breathing, and multiple Frisco ICD athletic trainers were performing CPR. Okay? So this is what they took down on April the 4th. Okay? So, Metcalf's funeral was on April the 12th. So we just going down the timeline, okay? So, on April the 14th, Anthony, he was arrested on the 12th, remember? He turned himself in right after the occurrence. And he was originally his bond was set at $1,000, right? But then on the 14th, the judge on the case at that time, she decided to reduce his bond to $250,000 and place him under house arrest. Okay, so I want to stop right there really quick because I want to read something to y'all. What happened to this judge who did that? So this article was published by Fox 4 on April the 25th. And it says Fresco track meet stabbing judge is victim of doxing. And is the subject, and this becomes a subject of an FBI investigation. Okay. So people have been, this is what what the article reads. Okay, this was published on April the 25th of 2025, and it says people have been publishing the personal address of the Collin County judge who agreed to lower Carmelo Anthony's bail bond. That process of doxing or publishing a person's private information with a malicious intent is illegal in Texas. Those responsible could face criminal charges. Okay, so it says the Collins County Sheriff's Office is investigating the alleged doxing of the judge who agreed to reduce Frisco track meet stabbing suspect Carmelo Anthony's bond. And then it says what we know. Give me 1 second. The name of that judge, her name is Angela Tucker. Okay. And it says, it goes into this what is doxing. We don't need to know that because I think some people already know what that is. You said the Collin County Sheriff's Office is investigating the alleged doxing of the judge. I read that part. It goes into this section called what is doxing. We don't need to read that. It's enough people know what that is. So it says earlier this month, Collin County Judge Angela Tucker reduced 17-year-old Carmelo Anthony's $1 million bond for the stabbing death of 17-year-old Austin Metcalf at a high school track meet. She lowered it to $250,000, saying it was set too high for someone with no criminal history. The murder case has made national headlines and has become racially charged. Collin County investigators said court staff and concerned citizens reported that people have been posting the judge's personal address on social media. Our main priority remains ensuring the judge's safety, and an appropriate security measures have been implemented, the Collin County Sheriff's Office said. Judge Tucker oversaw Anthony's bond reduction hearing, but another judge in Collin County will likely oversee his criminal trial. Okay. It says former Dallas County Assistant District Attorney Russell Wilson said law enforcement officials have seen an uptick in the number of threats and publications of private information as it relates to high profile cases. Certain information is publicly available, but judges and individuals in law enforcement do have a statute that allows them to remove some of their information from being publicly available. And so, publication of that information with the intent to cause harm or to them to get a threat is a crime in Texas. Those responsible for doxing could face criminal charges. Due to the nature of the situation, we are coordinating with the FBI and our Fusion Center to monitor for any concerning rhetoric or propaganda that would incite violence, the sheriff's office said. Okay? So, so this judge that lowered Metcalf's bond was doxxed and threats made against her for doing this. There's been a lot of riots, not riots, but a lot of protests that have taken place in the early stages of this reporting. And then there is anticipated that at this trial that there will be some more protests. And security people are cautioned to like be aware, and security levels have been heightened as a result of what they think might happen. This is why the judge did a whole lot of things to place these gag orders in order to try to prevent certain information from getting out for people to inflame the situation more than what it has already. That the doxing of that judge, this judge, he may have give me 1 second. This judge might have done this anyway, but because of the doxing of this judge, Carmelo Anthony's family was also their whereabouts. They had to be the government over in Texas had to make arrangements for them to be somewhere in an undisclosed location because of all of this. So the idea that the judge decided to put all of these restraints on the media, this is where it's coming from. It's coming from early on in this process, a judge being doxxed and threats being made to the judge. Okay. So that was on April the 14th. He was released on bond. Those events happened around April 14th, the doxing and releasing of the judge's information. And then, so Queen Keish, here it is. On June the 11th, surveillance video was released. So this is what it says, and then I'll post it, okay? So it says on June 11th, Fresco ISD allowed some members of the media to view its surveillance footage of the stabbing under Texas open record law. CBS News Texas investigate producer Kelsey Mature watched the video in person and was only allowed to take written notes. So, okay, the video wasn't released. They allowed certain members of the media to view the video and report on the video. So this is becoming consistent with how this case has been being handled, because this is from the early onset of the case that they have been very quiet about things being put out. And we see that in June the 11th, when the surveillance video was made available, it was only made available to certain members of the media. Okay. Mature described that the camera position near the stadium's press box was far enough away that individuals were not easily identifiable. At approximately 9:55 a.m., a sudden movement is seen under a tent in the bleachers, followed by interaction between two figures. Several people are seen walking or running away while others approach the area. So on June the 24th, Karmelo Anthony is indicted on murder charges. Okay. And Collins County District Attorney Greg Willis announced that a grand jury indicted Anthony for murder, a first-degree felony with a possible sentence of 5 to 99 years or life in prison. Willis said this team worked to present evidence to the grand jury for weeks. We know this case has struck a deep nerve here in Collin County and beyond. That's understandable. When something like this happens at a school event, it shakes people to the core, Willis said in a statement. But the justice system works best when it moves with steadiness and with principle. That's what we're committed to, and that's exactly what this case deserves. And I call bullshit. Okay? I call bullshit. So Anthony's attorney, Mike Howard, released a video statement um, accident after the indictment, saying in part, Karmelo and his family are confident in the justice system and the people of Collin County. To be fair and impartial, of course, Karmelo looks forward to his day in court, because it is only in a trial that full stories can be heard and that impartial justice can be done, Howard continued. We expect that when the full story is heard, the prosecution will not be able to rule out of the reasonable doubt, will not be able to rule without the reasonable doubt that Karmelo Anthony may have acted in self-defense. So those statements were released. He was indicted June 25th of 2025. June 24th of 2025. The statement was released by the prosecutor, Greg Willis, and then Karmelo Anthony's attorney, Mike Howard, also released a statement. We go to June the 9th, where the judge sets a trial date for June the 1st, which was yesterday. Jury selection began, okay? Judge, on April the 18th of 2026, the judge restricts the media. On April 18th, Judge Roque issued strict rules for the media and the public who are interested in following the trial. He wrote that the case has generated substantial public and media attention, and unrestricted access or activity may compromise courtroom security, juror privacy, and defendants' right to fair trial. Notably, he prohibited live streaming and any audio or video recording. Media will be able to take notes on laptops with the court's approval. A few weeks later, Roque amended the order to clarify that cell phones will be prohibited in the courtroom. People who attend the trial will also be prohibited from reacting, gesturing, wearing distracting clothing, or otherwise disrupting the proceedings. The order also laid out rules for protests or other demonstrations, restricting them to certain areas outside of the courthouse. All attendees will go through security screening, and congregating in the hallway will not be allowed. So that is the timeline of what happened from Carmelo Anthony and Austin Metcalf's interaction, the crime being committed, and then up till the judge making and setting the rules for court and how he will govern his courtroom during the duration of this trial. Okay? So, give me 1 second. I just want to make sure we are getting a proper foundation. So as we go through this trial, we will be able to have some good conversation without having to lay that foundation. I think, wait a minute, there's a couple of other things. I think that's it. I think that's all I have for tonight. I just wanted to make sure, I just wanted us to lay a foundation for what has taken place, what the issues are, what the social climate is looking like as a result of this um, true crime event. And so the last thing I want to talk to you guys about is some of the things that they talked about doing jury selection. So they said about 600 individuals showed up for jury selection, and they approximately 100 of them were sent home after going through the first part of the questionnaire. Like with most jury selection, the first individuals who are usually eliminated are people who have issues with time constraints. They might have to take care of a loved one. They might have already had plans to go out of the country. It might be some other type of extenuating circumstance or disability or something that might be prohibiting them from sitting on a trial for a long period of time or sitting for long periods of time. And so these are the questionnaires that normally are getting weed out to begin with. So it was 600, and they said it went down to 500. They sent what was reported by Nika Knight and Queen Sheba is that they sent them home with like this questionnaire that they needed to complete and then get back into the court. Now, I don't know if the reason why court wasn't in session today was so that they could sort through that and then come to a smaller number that would return then tomorrow morning. That's what I'm thinking. One of the reasons. There could have been some other reason too why court didn't happen today, but that because that questionnaire they say was part of the process. Queen Sheba nor Nick at Night mentioned what was on the questionnaire, so I don't think they were able to get a copy or see what was on the questionnaire. But the jurors were given this questionnaire, and then they were sent home with the questionnaire, and I'm sure they were required to have to get it back probably today or probably at the end of yesterday evening, and then so that the court can have time to go through them. They can eliminate the ones that they don't want to come back and come back with a much smaller number tomorrow morning. But tomorrow morning we will get to see if that was actually what took place, right? And so we have that. So one of the things that Queen Sheba talked about was that the judge gave a lecture to the potential jurors on fairness, right? And discussing about what's fair and what's not fair. And that the judge made it clear that the reason why he had such tight restrictions on the release of information on this case was because he was attempting to protect the defendant's due process rights, and that he was not going to allow the media to come to this verdict. That he was going to do he was doing his due diligence and doing the best job possible to try to prevent the media from having too much influence on this verdict, right? And so this is why he put in place the things that he put in place in order to limit the information that the media would have access to. And there are lots of people who don't agree with this. But in a lot of cases, I do believe that that is the best way. I do. I also, though, think that when you don't have a gag order on a case, it is not just all the prosecution's burden to ask or request for the gag order. Because the defense can request or ask for a gag order too. It doesn't have to be the judge. The judge can make a determination. The judge can either enforce a gag order or he can respond to a motion for gag order. But it can be requested by both parties. And sometimes neither party wants a gag order because they want to be able to try to sway and manipulate the media. And they can't just ask for the other side to be gagged and then they can do all the talking. And then, and vice versa. The other side can't ask for this other side to be gagged and then they do all of the talking. And so a lot of times neither side wants to be gagged because they both want to have an opportunity to try to influence the public. That so I think this judge did what was necessary. And as much as you hear so many people talking about this judge being a Republican, and so they feel like that already brings him there with a degree of unfairness. I don't think so. I don't think so. That's I think we might end up being surprised by this judge. I really think that we might end up being surprised by this judge if there is a guilty verdict. Now, hopefully, depending on how the evidence lays out, if it lays out the way I think it is, and if it's as black and white as the police reports have been saying, what the other bystanders have been saying, what he said happened, hopefully we won't even get to a guilty verdict on a first degree murder, right? But I feel like if we arrive at a guilty verdict on a first degree murder, it's something about this judge that I think might shock people, despite them thinking because he's a Republican that he is going to be harsher on this case. I think he did all of the things he did to protect the process. Where some people will look, especially media, will look at all of what he did and they will scrutinize it. And then this is the funny part, I think. They'll scrutinize it from their vantage point, right? Because we see that a lot. Like, we see the media wanting to have all the information and they want to talk about the situation from their vantage point. They don't want their vantage point to be restricted from being discussed, but they are in favor of a lot of time the other side being restricted and not discussed. And so you can't have it both ways. And that's what I mean when I was saying about why in a lot of situations you don't see a gag order happen unless the judge does use his power to do it, or one of the other side, one or the other side requested through a motion. You don't, this is why you don't see it. Because each side wants to have the right to say what they want to say to the public. But they just don't want the other side to have the right to say what they want to say to the public. And so I find it weird that, like, a lot of times people want to they say, okay, well, this is what the prosecutor should do, or this is what the defense should do, or this is what the judge should do in order to try to protect the case. But then when it comes to a judge who is restricting access, he is getting criticism for this. He is being criticized for this. And then it will be, in the end, if people don't get what they want, they will say because there was no transparency. So it's no way, when this whole thing is, when what comes down to it, it's no way to please anyone. It's no way to please everyone. Because this judge is being scrutinized for his restriction on the media. And you have lots of members of the legacy media and non-traditional media who are criticizing that, and they are saying it's a lack of transparency. And it is a lack of the people being able to have access to the public information. It's hindering the freedom of speech, right? And so these are all of the arguments you get in the reverse when a judge does do something like this. So I found that to be interesting as I was listening to this. So it was reported by Queen Sheba, right, that some of the jurors were very testy with the judge. And it was because the judge was making it clear to them as potential jurors that in my court you're going to follow the law. That's what is required, right? So he's saying, listen, I know you all might have some personal feelings. I know you all might have some idea of what you think is right. But in this courtroom, we are going to tell you what the law says, and you are going to come to the determination based on the law. And he made the statement that the law is not dependent on anything. And so it was mentioned that there were several jurors, and some, not all of them were black, they were white ones, who were questioning the judge on this point and saying, well, what if the law is unfair? This country has a history of administering the law in a way that is not fair. And so the judge had, some conversation with them surrounding that. And in order to get a more detailed description of that, you can go to Queen Sheba's channel, and because she talks about it. She does a really good review of that. But the jury, the first day of jury selection was rather interesting, according to what the attendees reported. They were not in the same room with the jurors. The way they explained it, the way those attendees explained it, they said they are expecting and anticipating that they are going to be in this separate room through the duration of the trial. So they can hear what is going on, but they cannot see anything. So they are in a whole separate room where they can hear, but they can't see anything. Now, I don't know if that is only because of the number of jurors that they had to fit into the main courtroom during the jury selection process, and if that is why it is set up that way, or if that room, the media room, is a permanent residence throughout this trial for the media. But if that is the case, they are saying that there is no visual, that there is only audio. And so we won't probably not get much information about the description of what the witnesses look like or anything like that. And again, I think this judge is doing this in an effort to try to protect everyone, to protect those jurors, to protect to keep a control within the courtroom itself. He's really being cautious and taking every precaution necessary in order to try to maintain the safety of everyone. Those bailiffs, they want to go home at the end of the night. The people in the court, they want to go home at the end of the night. And so, and there have been surrounding this whole thing. I know the Proud Boys, Trump boys, they've been involved in some of the protests that have had to go with this, and so and they know they are prone to violence, and their violence has been sanctioned by the United States government, by the pardon of the president Donald Trump. And so, how far people will go, you don't know. And so, I think this judge has done a lot in order to try to maintain and make the court as secure as possible. Of course, it is no guarantee, but he is doing everything in order to try to show everybody in that courtroom that he's trying to protect them, that he's trying to protect their rights. And that is why I'm saying that I think that if in the case that Karmelo is found guilty of first degree murder, I think we might be surprised by the judge. And I want to leave you guys with one thing, right? One last thing, because I want to tell you something about this judge, right? So, um, this article, and this is why I'm saying this. So, this article comes from KX 212 News. And the article title is Veteran Judge Recognized for the Lives He's Touched, right? This was published back in the 2020 March of 2023 by Hannah Gonzalez. And the article reads, it wasn't the pounding of the gavel that commanded attention and celebration inside of this courtroom, but the judge himself. It was a complete surprise to me to be honored because that's not what any of us do it for, said Judge John Rowe of the North Texas Veterans Court. Friday, the American Legion Post 231 in Pottsboro presented a plaque to Marine veteran Judge Roque for everything he's done. We've had a lot of our veterans go through his courtroom and come out successful, said Post 231 Commander Andrew Lowry. Every month, veterans of Grayson County meet before Judge Roque. These vets were charged with a criminal offense connected to their military service. What Judge Roque said is he wants to make sure that their civilian record matches their honorable military record, says Brett Smith, Grayson County District Attorney. To do this, they go through a 2-year program, like 2 veterans who appeared before Judge Roque Friday and now have a second chance. Their charges were dismissed and their record was expunged, Smith said. One of those veterans was from Post 231. Commander Lowry spoke on behalf of that veteran whose case was dismissed. I think whatever reason he was before Judge Roque, he certainly was able to overcome any barriers and obstacles and get his life back on track to where he wanted to go. Judge Roque said days like today make it worthwhile. We see them when they came into the court, and we see them when they're probably at their lowest. And to watch them progress and get their lives back on track, that is exactly why we do it, and we'll continue to do it. For this 10 years of service on the Veterans Court bench, the men and women he serves are saying thank you. And that's what I want to leave y'all with tonight. I think a lot of people are doubting this judge's ability to be fair because of his political affiliation. But I wanted to leave you with that because it was something when he said that he wanted their record to reflect their service. He wanted their record to reflect their service. And in this situation, this is a very unfortunate situation that ended up ruining and causing a devastating impact on both of these families, on the lives of both of these children, because of a bad decision that both of them made. It wasn't a bad decision that one of them made. It was a bad decision that both of them made. Austin made a bad decision to think that it was okay for him to do what he did to initiate the altercation. And Karmelo made a bad decision to take a weapon that he shouldn't have had on him at school and take it out and use it to defend himself. I think that is clear in the police report. I think that is the clearest path to self-defense. Whether people will interpret it as self-defense or not is one thing. But I think it is a very clear path to self-defense. Both boys did something that was very unfortunate. It ended up impacting the lives of both of these boys. But you look at this one child who is left here. You look at his past record and you say nothing in his past record says that he came to that place that day with that malicious intent for this to happen. And so just like this judge could look at those veterans and say, okay, I know that these veterans have committed some kind of crime that was connected to their service to the military. But I have to look at everything that they did throughout their military record and say, okay, are they worthy of another chance? And I think that in the event that Karmelo is found guilty of first degree murder, I think that this is something that will be considered by this judge in his sentencing. I hope we don't get to that. I don't see where any jury is going to be able to arrive at that based on what we have so far. Maybe something will come out during the trial that will change my mind anyway about it. But if we get there, I have good feelings that this judge is going to weigh all of the things in order to come to a sentence that will not take this boy's entire life. Is it possible that he should do some time for his decision? Maybe. Depending on how the evidence comes out, maybe. Do I think it's a first degree sentence? No. Is there something else maybe that maybe? But do we get to a self-defense? And will his defense team be able to prove that he was defending himself in order to say, okay, he should be not guilty and shouldn't be found guilty in any count that they could have come up with in order to charge him and cause him to do jail time? Now, I can't say that if I was sitting on a jury where it might have been a lesser charge and they put the evidence before me, that I might not arrive to a guilty verdict. I do not arrive to a guilty verdict on a first degree murder charge against Karmelo Anthony. And that's where I stand on this right now. And so, as we see, tomorrow we'll continue jury selection. The judges are anticipating the jury selection will be complete tomorrow. Opening statements are expected to start on Thursday morning. I will try to come back to you guys so that we can do a roundup and have a conversation about after we are able to hear from the different commentators about what took place in court, and after we are able to hear from legacy media about their reporting of what happened in court. I don't know if they're going to be able to only take notes, the legacy media, if they're only going to be able to take notes and then only be able to report once they leave the courtroom, or if they will be able to report from the courtroom. I'm not sure. So we're just going to have to wait and see how that works and how that goes. But we will be depending on them in order to get the news on this trial, because the judge has done everything he can to safeguard any type of mishap in this process. So, you guys, I gotta get to bed because I've been on here with you guys for a long time. I hope you all have a great rest of your night. I hope you all have a productive morning. Hopefully, I'll be able to get back to you guys and talk to you on tomorrow evening. But if I don't, then I will try to make it back to talk to you guys on Thursday evening. And that's it. Good night. Y'all have a good night.